Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all doing well. I'm JJ, and today this video is going to be about reading. So, if you're currently learning a foreign language or you're thinking about learning a foreign language and you're wondering, why should I read? Or what are some ways to think about reading? Like, how do I start? How do I approach it? How do I get better? What's the best way to read? Then maybe this video is for you. I'm going to keep this video quite simple. So I'm going to talk about three things, kind of high level. So it's kind of maybe it's a little bit general, to be honest. But I think this is a great way to start. In fact, if I'm learning any language or for all my students, I would recommend to think about these three things first when you're thinking about reading in a new language or in a foreign language. So I'm going to go right into it. And of course, this isn't comprehensive. There are a lot of fine details, and depending on your language, depending on your goals, depending on you, things might be a little bit different. However, I think these three things are very important to keep in mind, and I think that no matter where you are in your language journey, having these three things about reading will really help you either improve right now, or how to plan your strategy, I suppose, so that you can keep learning and, I don't know, get the best out of reading. Oh, I'm so excited. I love reading. Okay, so here are the three things. I'm going to start with number one. Number one is purpose. This is something that we don't usually think about when it comes to reading. It's kind of weird, but everyone just usually thinks, okay, I'm going to learn a language. Okay, I need to read. Like, everybody knows reading is good for you or something like that. Readers are leaders. And the problem here, in my opinion, these are my personal opinions, is that a lot of times people have this idea, okay, I just need to read a few pages, or I need to read a book or whatever. And they think that it will help them, and they don't think about why they're doing it. And so what happens is when things get difficult, when things are not fun, if they're only reading like their textbook or whatever, many students want to give up, or they feel angry at the language. They feel like the language is stupid, that it's a waste of time. And then this negative spiral, when you feel frustrated, it's very easy to just quit if you have no reason to do what you're doing. But when you have a reason, a purpose, it's easier to get through the hard times because you understand that you're suffering maybe, but you're suffering for a reason so that you can do something in the future. So let's look at this really quickly. I believe personally reading has two main benefits. Okay, maybe two main ones, I'll say for now. The biggest things, in my opinion, that reading can help you with is actually by reading more, you can improve your writing ability in that language because reading fuels great writing. So for any of you who want to learn how to become better writers in that language, I would say reading is so crucial. Just think about it. Think about your own language. All the people who are good at writing, they probably read a lot. And there's a reason for it, because when you read a lot, you start to see more examples. You will start to see different ways that authors use the language, the grammar, the vocabulary, the expressions, all of that, the style. The second thing is, I believe, for more of us, is going to be more important, which is reading is, in my opinion, the best way to learn vocabulary in your new language. Now, why is that? Well, to be honest, you can learn vocabulary from listening as well. That's fine. In fact, for conversation, everyday use, listening might be better because, depending on where you are, different people use different words, different phrases. For example, here, nobody will say in Toronto, Canada, I don't hear people say, hello, good morning, how are you? I don't hear people talk like that. Most of the time it's hey or hi, and like what's going on? Well, what's up? And it's one of those things where in a textbook you might not see it. In a textbook, often it can be a little more, sometimes a little more formal, and so they might use words to teach you things that we don't really use in real life or that we don't use in everyday conversation. So listening is good. Forgive me. Listening is good for that. However, Reading is really, really key because we actually use more complicated words when we read than when we speak. In fact, if you think about your conversations, most of our conversations, we use the same simple words. And there is a reason for this. In my opinion, the reason is very simple. It's because when we're talking, like even now, when I'm talking to you in this YouTube video, you can see my face. You can hear the different sounds of my voice. For example, you can hear that maybe I'm excited right now. I care about what I'm talking about. But so I don't need to use complicated words. I don't need to prove to you that I care. You can just hear it in my voice. You can see it on my face. But for example, in a book, you cannot see the people, talking or jumping. So for example, in real life, I can say something like, "You're beautiful." But in a book, if it just says "you're beautiful," that's great. But we might not get the sense of how beautiful whatever is. You would use maybe like a simile. "You're as beautiful as a rose," for example. And the great thing about reading is the more you read, the more exposure you'll have to different types of vocabulary. So I would say reading is great for that. In terms of vocabulary use or vocabulary, it's wonderful. Also because when you're reading, you see how the word is written, whether it's in whatever script it is or in a different like characters, like if you're learning like Mandarin or something. And you might get more of a visual, like there's just more connections maybe. And I say maybe because in real life, you might actually, for me personally, I actually learn words better when I use them or see them in context in real life because I try to memorize the actual event. I try to make it emotional. I'm talking about that some other time. It's a different video. Okay, so those are the two things. Now, I'm going to be totally honest and transparent with you. Personally, when I'm learning a new language, usually I'm not trying to improve my writing to be that great, and I don't need to have the most complicated vocabulary. For most of the time when I'm learning a new language, I'm learning it to communicate with people, to make friends, to travel, and to be honest, it's very simple. What's more important for me when I'm learning a language is I need to be able to listen to native speech and I need to be able to talk back. So my focus is actually more on listening and speaking. However, I use reading primarily for, being able to get around, being able to survive when I'm traveling in a new place and to understand like basic things. So that's something, I'm only saying that because everyone's goal is different. Your goal might be very different, and I would say adjust accordingly. The second thing I want to talk about, I've mentioned this in a previous video. It's this idea called compelling, comprehensible input. This is not my idea. It's an idea, one of the people who promotes it a lot or talks about it is Dr. Stephen Krashen. And compelling, comprehensible input just means compelling, it's interesting. Comprehensible means you can understand it. You don't have to understand 100%, but you understand the main ideas. And input is, reading and listening. So to focus on that. Now, why am I bringing this up again? Because many students always ask, what should I read? Which book should I read? What should I do? Teacher, tell me. And my answer to that would be to use compelling, comprehensible input as your guide. It's your compass. It's your map. And focus on compelling first. So always, in my opinion, read what's interesting to you. And the reason why that's important is because if you read what's interesting to you, you're going to think it's more relevant to your life. And because you're going to think it's more relevant to your life, you're going to actually find it easier to keep going, and you're going to find it easier to remember and to understand and to actually absorb the information. Think back to when you were a kid. What did you like to read? For example, for me, when I was reading long books, I like to read fantasy and stuff like that. But what I really love to read, I love to read manga. I love to read comic books because they were so interesting. And what would happen is maybe, for English class, I would have to read a chapter. I could not even read a chapter. It took me a week to read a chapter because the book was so boring. Wuthering Heights, so boring. But I could read an entire comic book in one day because I was so excited to keep reading. And so that's something really important. In fact, I would say this to make it very simple: your goal should be you're having so much fun reading that you forget it's in a different language. That would be the goal. It can be anything. It can be a book, comic books, things online, for example, like articles, even things like I like to use Instagram. I like to read like memes and stuff just to understand different culture and the way they look at like humor. So that could help too. But I want you to focus on that first. Think about what's interesting to you. And for example, if your goal is you want to study marketing in the future in this language, then try to read books about marketing. And that's something that I would definitely recommend. The last thing, number 3, the analogy I want to use for reading is I want you to think of reading like exercise, especially exercising at, for example, a gym, like a routine. It's just like the gym. There's a sweet spot of learning, a sweet spot of growth. And that's your level right now, a little bit above your level. You see, if you go too much, if it's too difficult, it's like at the gym. If you lift something too much, you see that beautiful girl or you see that really handsome guy and you want to impress them, you might get injured, right? But if you do something so easy, if every day it's super duper easy, you're never going to grow because you're already at that level. You're already there. So the sweet spot, the Goldilocks spot, the golden area of learning, of growth is just a little bit above your current level. So when you're reading, I encourage you to look for things that either are, you understand most of it, but not everything, but a little bit above your current level. So for example, for me, like in Spanish right now, I'm reading in the Spanish version of El Principito. I hope I'm saying that right. I haven't, oh my gosh. But to be honest, this is difficult for me. Like, I was surprised. I thought it was gonna be nice and easy. This is not an easy book. I don't think it's for kids, man. I think it's for adults. But I'm reading this, and it's awesome because in this context, it's the easiness is I already know the book. You can always do that. You can always read books you already know. That way, you already understand the main idea, and you're trying to enjoy the language. You're trying to feel the flavor of the language. The next part, when I'm bringing this analogy of gym, is once you find that sweet spot, it's just like going to the gym. If you go to the gym one day, only for one day, and you work out 24 hours, and then the rest of the year you don't do anything, it's not going to help. Instead, you need to build a consistent habit. Maybe every week you go to the gym 3 times a week, or a few times a week, or whatever. Reading and language is exactly the same. If we read one book and then we stop reading for the rest of the year, we're not going to really get anything out of it because naturally humans forget. So I encourage all of you to build a reading practice, a reading routine or reading habit. It doesn't need to be crazy. It can be something really small, like maybe if reading is important to you, and that goes back to number 1, you need to think about your purpose. If reading is important to you, maybe read, I don't know, like 10 minutes every day or 1 page a day or something like that. Start small. And when that becomes easy, then you level it up. Many students, unfortunately, have this, like, we try to do things too fast, too soon. We say, I'm going to read 1 book a week. And it just. And then when it doesn't happen, we feel sad and we don't do it. So I really encourage you, that's my last point, which is when it comes to reading, it's all about building that habit. So going back to everything, I'm going to summarize the 3 things I would say for reading. The first thing is know your purpose, your objective. Why are you doing it? I recommend reading specifically. It's great for writing, for improving your writing, and also for improving vocabulary. The second thing is to think about compelling, comprehensible input. Try your best to focus on enjoyment. And the goal for that is you're enjoying it, you're having so much fun that you don't remember or you don't realize it's in a different language. The last thing is to think about reading like exercise. It's like gym. It's like going to the gym. You want to be in the sweet spot, a little bit difficult, not too difficult, and not too easy. So a sweet spot. And then you want to make it a habit. It doesn't need to be a lot every day. You don't need to go crazy. Some days will be good. Some days will be bad. But when you build the habit, you'll be surprised after 1 year how much you actually read. So those are the 3 things. I hope they're helpful. And thank you so much for watching. I apologize for not making a video yesterday. I fell asleep and I got maybe a little bit lazy. But I'm going to be back on this. I'll see you all next week. Again, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to, write any comments if you have any questions or any comments at all. And yeah, feel free to subscribe, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next week. That's JJ out.